you subscribe to Pando? That's so hot.
Here we go. All right. First of all, everyone, happy New Year, right? First episode in this year. Hope you guys had a good time with family. If my voice, Miranda says my voice sounds normal, but if my voice sounds different, it's because I had a bit of a cold. Not the Rona, I'm pretty sure. Actually, I don't know. Could have been the Rona.
I'm pretty sure it actually was the Rona.
Oh, whatever it was. I'm over it. But yeah, there you go. ieatpaperbag has been on before. I think you have been on twice, right?
No, just once.
Just
before.
once. Why did I think you weren't twice? Maybe I think we were lining something up and then it didn't work out or something.
Oh, I think you used to do these things where you would show like a recording of a previous fight, and you would kind of like do like a video AAR of it.
Oh
And I
yeah,
think I dipped in for one of them.
that might be it. Yeah. And then Karmen Jell, another test FC, who's claiming to have a really good record against Kikis, which we're gonna discuss.
Oh man, I never said it was really good. Like 60-40 maybe? I don't know.
60-40? Well, that's not a bad. Like, whenever I fight you guys, obviously, I don't like. Technically, I could look up who pinged and all that stuff, but most of the time I don't bother with that. Like, honestly, I don't bother with it because, like, in my experience, sometimes it distracts just a little bit much. Maybe I should do it more. I don't know. But so whenever I fight you guys, I don't know who's exactly FCing, right? So I know at least one fight where I fought you, and I do believe you won that one, at least Esquires. And that was the one, maybe you remember that one. We tackled some raw calls in Upper Ezo. Like, I call it Upper Ezo. I don't know what you guys call it. Like, towards Stain.
Yeah, it's like Northern Esso.
Yeah, and then we tackled those. We're just fucking around with them like we always do. And then the Stain Russians come with me saying, hey, you want some dreads? It's like, sure, bring them in, right? But it was already fairly late in, so I kind of know the timing, right? If you wait too long with it, it's like you lose the momentum, or not the momentum, but you lose the, that moment where you can surprise people with the dreads, with a couple dreads, and then get them out again. So it was a little late. They knew it though. They fielded them anyway, and I think you guys showed up at Supers shortly after. I'm not sure if we killed any rockets. I think we might have killed one or two. I don't know.
I think you killed some facts, but I think all of the Rockles lived, although some of the excavators died. I do remember this fight.
Yeah, and then you were also shit-talking a little bit in local. I remember that one.
Oh,
yeah.
I was feeling fucking pumped after that, man. That was a good fight.
Yeah, it was alright, I guess. I don't know. I think we had a good brawl with the Kikis and the Mutants.
Yeah,
and then we had to
good.
run, but I think I got away with most of the Kikis still. So most of the losses Esquires was actually dreads.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. I mean, like I remember it was Shut Up and Shave who was running that fleet, and I was kind of like there just because I was there, like as backseating in the monitor kind of thing. You guys were like at zero practically on the Rockles, like with them in bubbles and stuff, and we bridged in. And like he got webbed, like Suez got webbed instantly, pretty much. So we swapped the anchor to me, and I started playing range, and we started trading pretty well. And you were killing our Logi, and then we dropped faxes. And then like you guys were like burning around in bubbles, like trading with our faxes on grid, except you kind of stopped trading that well when the faxes were there. And I remember thinking like at a time, like, why are they still here? Like they're clearly not gonna win this fight with faxes, right? Yeah, I kind of like in the back of my head was like, something's wrong here, like what's wrong? And the dreads turned up like later on. The dreads turned up pretty late actually, and they killed a couple of faxes, and we kind of already had some caps lined up. We ended up dropping supers like 200 and just like DDing all the dreads, I think. Yeah, it was a really good fight.
The timing was shit for the dreads. But sometimes, sometimes you get away with it anyway. You drop them. And then even if it's super late, or maybe because it's super late, like if you field the right dreads, let's say, right? I'm just saying the right dreads is the right ticker, right? Like if we field suddenly 5 snuff dreads, you would be like, I don't know, right? Like if Snuff shows up with 5 dreads, you're like, it's not like they never show up with just 5 dreads, right? So, then you would have to be very careful suddenly, right? And sometimes it's just 5 dreads though. So,
Ticker tanking is definitely a thing. Like you're totally right. If it would have been Snuff or like NC or something, we would have been like a little bit more question marks, a little bit more careful with the escalation.
Yeah.
When it's just the locals and you know what the locals themselves are capable of, you kind of know what's going to happen already, right?
Yeah, exactly. And those Stain Russians, they're crazy. right? So you can basically say like, there's a fair chance they don't care too much. They just fielded the dreads because they wanted to, and they're all right with it, you know?
Yeah, I know there's a lot of hate in test. Well, maybe not hate is the wrong word, but like there's a lot of like animosity between the Stain Russians and a lot of the people in test. And I think part of it's because like the Stain Russians are pretty good at what they do. Like they're kind of like a guerrilla warfare, small gang, kitey bullshit kind of like group. And given their fair due, they're pretty good at it. And it kind of riles people up a bit, you know? But yeah, they're really good at playing very conservatively and like not really taking too many fights that they might lose. And then every now and then they just throw caution to the wind and just do something absolutely insane. And you're just like, okay, I couldn't have predicted this because this is crazy. Like, why would anyone do this?
Yeah. Oh, by the way, your name, Karmen Jell. Is that from Command & Conquer? Karmen Jell, yeah?
I mean, it's actually not. I only found this out like years afterwards after I started playing. Like, I cannot remember why. It just seemed like a pretty cool name at the time. Like maybe I'd seen the name in Command & Conquer Generals or something, and it kind of stuck in the back of my head subconsciously. But yeah, I found out afterwards it was like very similar to like the Command & Conquer name. But no, it wasn't directly from there.
But you played Command & Conquer. Like, I think it was Generals where...
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. And, like,
there's...
in my opinion, Command & Conquer Generals, I know some people are going to hate me for it. Command & Conquer Generals was actually the best Command & Conquer. I think so.
I certainly heard that from a lot of people. I never played any of the Command & Conquer games like that seriously. I was back in kind of like my casual gaming days before I got very seriously into like competitive games and stuff. But yeah, I've heard that was the best one. There's actually, someone pointed this out to me a few months ago. There's actually there's a character, Karmen Jell, that's actually a Titan pilot in Goon Swarm.
Oh, really?
People keep joking about me that they found my Titan spy.
Was it created before or after your character?
I don't know. I haven't even looked.
I'm gonna guess before. It probably got created the second CNC Generals was a thing, right?
Oh, maybe. I don't know. I mean, my character's like 2008 or something, so it's pretty old.
I'm not even sure when Generals was a thing. Might have been 2004 or something.
Probably even before then, I think. But yeah, pretty old.
But from a strategic, RTS game, I always thought Command & Conquer, it's so weird. People always try to make it an esport title. But I think there's like the one mechanic, and I don't want to go too deep into Command & Conquer stuff, but there's one mechanic that I always want, like, I always wanted, like, how is that even a thing, which is endless money generation out of nowhere, right? Like, you had those job thingies and all that stuff, like, I forgot I want to say the Iraqis, like, I don't know what, like the Middle Eastern group, they had like a black market. And that was just, like, it's just a building that generates money, right? And it kind of reminds me of Passive Moons and stuff. But then, like, how, like, why would they put that into a strategy game? I think that takes so much out of it. And
yeah, I mean, resource like management is like a big part of, should be a big part of those games, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, if you look, for example, if you look at StarCraft, that's key. For anyone who has ever played StarCraft, it's key that you know, like, how much can you actually get, like, resource-wise. And at some point, resources are going to run out. Who has the most stuff at the moment? You know, everyone's running out of resources. And that just makes it more interesting, right? But, yeah. I mean, you can apply that on EVE for sure, too. With the whole, like, resource generation and all that stuff.
I think it's definitely a lot more like obscured in EVE, though, right? I mean, everyone kind of like understands that the big null blocks have a lot of stuff, but I think the real scale of it really isn't very apparent to a lot of people who haven't like. I mean, I only relatively recently got kind of like a bit more trusted in test, which is one of the bigger groups, and I never expected the scale of shit that they had to just be fucking lying around in hangars, right? So I think for the average EVE player, probably, you know, people probably don't quite understand just how much stuff null blocks have.
Yeah.
And to have it consolidated in the right place and accessible is a whole nother issue too. I mean, for some people, like, you know, people like goons that have been in Delve forever. I'm sure, you know, they're not quite as spread out, but
yeah, I mean, it's certainly been an interesting logistical challenge for us with the amount that we've been moving around. I mean, before the war erupted with goons, we were deployed to the northeast, you know, like around Inspeller and Cache area with like all of our stuff. So that was quite a job moving all that stuff back, you know, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fucking spare capitals and things.
I wonder
and
how
every
much.
time that you undock it to move it, you have a chance to lose it to somebody who's just waiting for you on the other side of the gate.
Well, if you use a gate, right? Most people, like, usually people play it very safe. I mean, especially in this war.
Look at when we were moving, a few months ago, and we were literally taking, like one jump through one gate, and we ended up losing 2 Titans for it.
Well, those Titans walked to the wrong gate, though.
I know, but that's what
I
I'm
know,
saying,
I know
though.
what you
Whenever
mean.
you
Yeah,
have a group
yeah, you're
of
right.
however many 100 people, like
There's always going to be
one
that
person
one
that
guy.
messes up, and then there's like, there you go. There's 2 Titans less that we had. That maybe we could have had them yesterday that we didn't have anymore.
That's how the war basically, how it started at first, right? Everything was getting moved, and the first Titans were getting lost, and that's how what always happens. Really, like anyone is deploying, like someone's gonna like fuck up and lose some shit.
Sorry, Pulse. No offense.
If you look at the scale, you could say it's quite impressive that that you guys didn't lose more, right? But then again,
yeah,
there's
I
not a
think we
whole lot
definitely
of.
expected to lose more during that time period, like at the start when we were jumping Titans constantly through like Fortizars and Losec.
Yeah, but the problem is also there's not a whole lot of people left that could hunt you, right? Because everyone's on that side, or a lot of people are on that one side. So, you know, it's not like NC would then suddenly drop your move up or something, right? So, you know, the risk from that point of view was a little lower, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we still managed to lose a good number even then, though, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, what are actually the numbers before this fight? Like, how many Titans were lost? Maybe like 10, 12, 15 or something total?
Yeah, sounds roughly right to me.
No.
It certainly wasn't a huge amount, but it was definitely the odd one here or there. Guy accidentally fleet warps to a gate kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It happens.
But yeah, I mean, that's one of the things actually I was going to touch on a second ago that I find actually very interesting about Eve is that, like, when you get to these kind of like bigger scale of like fights and just management of the size of groups that are in nullsec, you can kind of look at it as like being a strategy game on some levels, but it's also absolutely not like that at all because people just do stuff that's wrong all the time, you know? Like if you get a group of like 100, 200 people in a fleet, you tell them what to do, you can be the best FC in the game and like people will make mistakes and get stuff wrong. So you kind of have to always like operate on the understanding that 80 or 90% of your fleet at best are going to be doing kind of the correct thing they've been asked to do for any kind of multitude of very normal and reasonable reasons.
It's like what Pandora always says, is that 10% of any group are idiots.
Yeah.
So you can always count on at least 10% of the people fucking something up.
Yeah. And sometimes they die for it. Sometimes they get away with it too.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes they're just not anchoring properly, but sometimes they get bubbled and then they die.
I think it was Karmen or some other Strat FC in tests told me whenever you're taking your fleet from A to B, you should expect to lose like 5% of your guys are just going to find some way to get themselves killed along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you're walking around in empty space doing nothing, yeah, you'll still lose 5% of your fleet somehow to something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even want to know how many kickies we lost against like drifters and all that stuff, right? When I tell everyone like,
don't warp.
Don't warp to the wormhole, don't jump the wormhole, whatever, right? There's drifters here. There's always that one guy, like every time, right? He jumps, yeah. Or then you say like, okay, guy, if you just warp off, you're gonna be fine. But he doesn't. He lets like the cloak run out, and then he's like, "Oh, I'm decloaked. Now I'm gonna warp." And then he dies, and then he's gonna claim like, "Oh no, they insta locked me." Like, no, they didn't. You could have just warped, dude. It's always the same.
That's always how I actually figure out where your wormhole is. I see Kiki's dying to drifters.
Yeah, that always gives it away. And you know what? You know what? Maybe I It's not like every hostile ever is going to listen to this, right? But you know what's the most annoying part? That one guy who fucks up and dies also self-destructs then and then leaves a corpse. So when those drifters spawn, they just like drift all the way out there to pick up that corpse and then all the way back to jump the wormhole. And that takes ages. And then we sit there and have to wait for that. So, yeah.
I'm not going to pretend that I haven't self-destructed my ults on wormholes that I know hostiles are using. Just to have corpses around it.
You could just drop a corpse too.
200 IQ.
That is so cruel.
Yeah. Sometimes those drifters don't approach like straight either, which is like sometimes they behave weird. And then what you can also do is drop a corpse right on 0 on the wormhole, and then they go pick that corpse up. And when they're done with that, they're like, oh, I'm on 0 on the wormhole, and then they just jump out. So it kind of works both ways, but you have to like have a corpse ready, I guess.
I've actually noticed that most drifters are only on the wormhole for like a session timer amount of time. So what is that, like 5 seconds? And then they jump. Like if you look at it and there's nothing for them, like if you're cloaked and there's nothing to interrupt them, like it's literally the amount of time for the session timer, and they jump back in.
Yeah, you know why that is? Because I mean, like that's your impression because you map a lot of those wormholes. So you jump out of the wormhole, and then there's a chance when you jump out that they spawn. So when they spawn on 0 on the wormhole. If they spawn and there's nothing there, because you're still cloaked, they just jump out again because they're on 0 on the wormhole already. So I don't know why that is, but
it's like
I'm glad it's like that.
Yeah, it's the exact timing of the session timer. Like 99% of the time. Sometimes it's a few seconds more, but
yeah. And that's also what I hate, right? We jump, and I say, everyone hold cloak. And there's always that one guy decloaking, whooping off. And they stay, and we have to wait till they despawn. Yeah, till someone dies. But yeah, so let's talk about the kick immunant thing, right? So you say you have a good track record. You say 60-40.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I haven't really looked it up, but like I think most of the fights that we've had, they've either been even or I've won a bit. I know there's been a couple where you have won a bit. Like, it's never like a really one-sided fight, I don't think.
But
yeah, I think I've probably won a bit more, but it's relatively even, I would say.
But wouldn't you say that Munins should win every time against Pickies?
I think it very much depends on the battlefield that you're fighting on. I mean, if it's a case of like you both have an even-sized fleet and you start 70 kilometers away from each other, then yeah, Munins will just win 100% of the time with a competent FC.
Yeah.
But you guys got all those nasty little tricks.
Yeah, we figured some tricks out, but Munins are nasty. I mean, you can't really pin them down, right? It's like, how are you gonna hold, like, let's say 100 versus 100? How do I hold like 100-man fleets on 0? If they all anchor on one guy, we can manage. But usually people learn that lesson at least once, and then they don't rely on that one anchor. So
yeah, I mean, one of the things I think would be interesting, like it'll be interesting to see how the changes to the interdictors with web bubbles are going to affect that, especially when you're like controlling the grid that the Munins are going to warp into. I'm not really sure how that's going to play out, but it'll be interesting to see if it does affect it at all, because I haven't really seen those web bubbles to be effective against much yet. Yeah.
I don't think they're good against Hex, because Hex just move too fast, right? Like, try to get that web bubble onto Munins. Like, first of all, by the time you're on them on 0, like, just warping down, you're going to land too far behind them when they're moving. And then the bubble goes up and, it's simply not in range. So you kind of have to burn into them. Burning into Munins, I don't know if that's the greatest idea ever, right? So
it's very likely like it has a 3-second delay as well before the bubble pops. It's just like, a hack who's on one side of the edge of the bubble, by the time the bubble goes off, he's going to be almost outside the other side of it by the time it even goes out, right?
But if there was no delay, then it would be too strong.
Yeah.
For a lot of other reasons. But I do believe they brought him in thinking it is a good way to counter hex, which definitely isn't the case. I think it hurts kickies more than hex, because kickies are so slow, right? AB kickies, that is. That if you're in trouble, it's very hard to disengage with them. It's not easily done. And I'm not sure if that was one of your fleets. I think one of the last fleets I took into Ezo with kickies, we got pinned down pretty well, right? Like Dicta's coming in from all sides, and there's always that next Dicta, right? And to like 20 seconds to get out of a bubble, or like more, right? That's like technically, because we move with 1,000 meters per second, and it's 20,000 meters, obviously, through a bubble.
Yeah, I think
it
like,
just takes so long.
I think the thing that's actually been hurt the most by those web bubbles is just afterburner doctrines in general, which already were not popular at all. So, you know, in there, if this was what CCP was trying to do, to kind of like introduce like more counters to hacks, they've actually just nerfed afterburner doctrines. You know.
Yeah, they just made slow doctrines slower.
Yeah, it's pretty disheartening to see. But it's one of those things I would like to see it work, right? And I genuinely do think that if they fiddle the numbers enough, you know, and actually like do the correct amount of iteration on the design of it, I think they can be a useful, interesting mechanic. But they're just currently not. You know, currently they're only really good against gate, you know, as a gate camper, basically, or against afterburner doctrines.
So like the web bubble stuff, I bet like paperbag, that's kind of your stuff too then, right? If you think about it, you're more of a supportive FC. So you would have like a web dicta, maybe a prober ready to go, and then like warp down a web a fleet or something, right?
I mean, I haven't practiced with them a whole lot. The whole delay thing on them is really, in my opinion, what hurts it a lot. Basically what Karmen was saying. I have thought about trying to use them to put them in preemptive places to kind of corral a fleet, but I don't know.
What do you mean?
Like you know, put them preemptively in the direction they're headed, so that maybe they decide they don't want to go through it. But I don't know that it's really something that's worth it, to be honest.
Nightmares has exactly what I wanted to say right now. It's like, use them defensively to cut your own align time, which is a good point. Right? You can just land on a ping, then hit fleet warp and say web up, or like whatever you say. I don't want to say wobble because people are gonna fuck it up. So like, what did I say? I forgot what actually the term was. I thought first, but everyone seems to like wobble for some reason. But yeah, if you have, yeah, but like it's confusing too. Then you're webbed and bubbled by your own fleet. But yeah, so you can land on a ping, initiate fleet warp, then drop the bubble, and then you're gonna be in warp after 3 seconds or 4, right? Which is really strong.
I think the only thing I hesitate is just, I mean, you only have so many number of like experienced, you know, Dictor pilots, and most of them are just going to be better in the traditional Dictor.
Yeah, I mean, getting Dictors to not bubble your own fleet is hard enough most of the time.
That is true.
Yeah, I mean, knowing when, you know, the hostile fleet actually needs to be bubbled. A lot of guys don't understand that when two fleets are engaging, they generally want to be engaging, and that's not the time to be bubbling.
Yeah, there's nothing worse, I believe, than a fight kicking off and both sides are committed and there's no winner yet or anything, and that's not even close to being finished. And then you see like Dictors dive in and die like aimlessly, and then you win the fight, let's say, right? And the hostiles want to disengage and you don't have any Dictors left to bubble them. It's like, fuck.
Well, and that takes a lot of experience, right? To like understand like when a hostile fleet is looking like they want to try to extract, and then that's when you go in.
And then having the right angle to come in from, or having like bookmarks to warp to, and then just being ready to, you know, pounce. What I always say, like, be ready to pounce when hostiles want to disengage.
Right.
Yeah, I think Dictors are definitely one of the more interesting roles in a fleet, in the sense that they are like genuinely a kind of low SP, low ISK required to get involved in piloting a Dictor. But actually, the difference between a bad Dictor pilot and a good Dictor pilot is enormous. and a good dicta pilot in the right place at the right time can have an enormous effect on the outcome of a fight, right? I think that those kind of roles where actually being good at the game like makes a difference and makes you actually better in your role. I think we need more of that in Eve.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I mean, a dicta pilot can fuck up your own your fleet, or he can be the hero, right? So
yeah,
definitely.
going back to what I was saying earlier about the web bubbles, I think if you're trying to, corral a fleet or control their movement, I think just a traditional dictator is just better, at least in nullsec, where a lot of warping happens, and just the traditional, good drags, good stops really can control the way an enemy fleet can move around.
yeah, I think so. I did try to use the wobbles like once or twice, but it's very hard to find that opening. And then there comes that moment where suddenly you need a normal bubble, but you have the wrong shit loaded, right? And I think on average you're better off just having bubbles. Yeah, I think I agree. Which is why we don't see them at all, even in big fights where you would think like there should be at least like someone like one guy who really wants to make it happen, but you don't even see one guy trying to web you. Either you're so slow that it doesn't matter to them anyway. It's like you're gonna web our fucking battens, like whatever, or you're too fast so you can't get caught.
And also for a lot of null fleets, I mean they're anchored up on somebody, right? And if you really want to slow them down and cut their velocity, the best thing to do is to scram their anchor.
Yeah, you just bring like 5 hyenas and 10 sentinels and a nano hook, right?
Yeah.
I wonder who does that.
I don't know. Those are dirty tricks. I would never do that.
Yeah. That's one of the things I notice about the Kiki fleets that you run is that there's always all of this like utility that's like just there to pin down the anchors all the time. It's like it's one of those things like when you're fighting your Kikis, you just kind of have to understand that unless you actually like can get away from like 40 kilometers from the Kiki fleet, you're just brawling. There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, I mean, even brawling though, like, to come back to Kikis versus mutants, even brawling, even numbers, I think mutants still have the upper hand, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, certainly when you get to the larger number scales, the mutants definitely have the upper hand. Yeah. But then we stray into the conversation of like the attacker versus the defender in kind of like home regions in nullsec and that kind of thing. And kind of the difficulty there is that if you're going through a wormhole, you had like 40 minutes at most to kind of like sort out all your fleet, like get all your dudes in fleet, make sure your fleet comp's sorted, make sure you got all your links and everything, everyone's on watch lists. Yep. And then on the defending side, you're just on the clock the whole time. You have normally at most 6 minutes to get a fleet pinged, formed, sorted out, links done, anchor set, lodging anchor set, undocked, on a Titan, signings in range. Just like 6 minutes to get all that shit done. And like that's tricky.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we don't form for 40 minutes. Usually our standard form up time is 15 minutes, but that's still 3 times as long as like a defender would have, right?
Yeah, I mean, just for the sake of argument, I'm just throwing numbers out there, right? I mean, if you wanted to, you could do, right? Kind of regardless of whether you do normally need to or not. And then you just sort of duck into a wormhole that you've previously mapped and you just, pop out kind of anywhere, largely. I mean, obviously it's not anywhere, but, it's tricky. And especially like, certainly like the Kiki fleets that we've seen the last probably year or so that have been down to Esoteria, they've been a lot more manageable because the numbers have been a bit lower. Like it's rare to see a whaling fleet that's over like 100, 150 people. Whereas there certainly was a time where we were seeing whaling fleets for like 250 people and like sometimes even 2 whaling fleets at the same time, right?
Yeah. Those were the times. I mean, it had to do with like how much content was out there, right? Because there was rockers everywhere. So it was very easy for me to provide fights every day reliably, right? So I could always
like wherever we were going, there was going to be something for us to get there.
Yeah. I mean, not everywhere maybe, but we would always have 3 Desties lined up, and one of them, 99% of the time, one of them would be something, right?
Yeah,
And-
for sure.
And then it's very easy to like pick up that momentum and like grow numbers and you know, add
mean,
to it those little things like the sentinels and stuff like this. I enjoy that kind of shit. Like it's like theory crafting, right? That's what I do when I'm not FCing. So
Yeah.
adding sentinels, then Rodivas to keep the inhibs alive, or what else?
Snowflakes, all the snowflakes.
Yeah, snowflake simmies, for example, which obviously Miranda flies all the time. You know, that kind of stuff. That's for me, that's like probably most fun of it.
Yeah, there's certainly some of that stuff which is like real rewarding, I think, when it kind of works out, or, you know, when it works for you. Like, I definitely remember being in a couple of those fights where I've somehow managed to like kill the webs, and then I'm kind of finally starting to like get my macro warp drive on in the monitor, and then you realize you got no cap because of the sentinels, and you just sort of look at the overview and you're just like, that's
Damn
nasty.
it.
That's nasty.
Yeah, you know what? We actually stopped bringing sentinels because, I mean, originally we had sentinels only in the Stuka fleets, which was mostly bombers, obviously, right? But when we switched to almost entirely Kikis, the Kikis have a small newt, which is more than enough newt power to cap out a fax or a dread or whatever. So we didn't really need the sentinels for that.
That's kind of just your fleet kind of configuration evolving, right? Due to kind of your own experience flying it and working out what you need and what you don't need.
Yeah, and I like that's the process I enjoy the most, I think. So there's a new problem coming up, and then you know you adjust. Like for example, the inhibs, right? Boom, like the problem isn't like, or used to be, that you put an inhib up and then you have to extend the lifetime at least. You can never save it really, but you can at least try to extend the lifetime to a degree. And maybe in that lifetime we did kill Titans before. So what happens a lot of times is, or used to happen nowadays, not so much, because all the Titans are dead. But we drop an inhib.
It's interesting how that's different though, right? So on the side of like the kind of whaling Kiki fleet, there's a lot more nuance in like the setup to it, like which specific ships you bring, which roles they have, how do you kind of like edge out a specific kind of advantage in this little area. Whereas on the defending side, it's generally like a lot simpler, but just a lot more like basic FCing technique and just doing basic things well that kind of guides you to victory a bit more. Like making sure that you don't get bombed by all the bombers. That's a good one. Don't get bombed. That's a bad way to start a fight.
Well, every FC has to learn that lesson the painful way, right?
I remember, like, because I think I've only really been FCing for about 18 months or something like that. Like, seriously. One of the first times I FC'd a big fleet was, I think we were in the war, I think it was last year with Fraternity and Deterred at the time. There was, like, some of the friendly Russians that we were allied with had got a bunch of Rorquals tackled in PEK tack, which I think, like, the near Innsmouth. And I was, like, the only person that could form a fleet to go and help. And it was like initiative with like a 250 person like Stuka fleet or something. And, like Horde was there with like another 250 people like Stukas. And I got like 200 people in the Moonin fleet. And I was like, man, this is real good. It's good numbers. I'm feeling real good about this. And I got on grid and I got landed on by you at 30 kilometers and webbed, and 200 Moonin fleet was just gone to bombs. Just complete gone. And that was the first time I think me and you fought. And after that, I was just like, right, okay, I've got to learn how to do this.
That's his specialty, though.
Well,
yeah,
that's the thing. That was like the good old Stuka times where you could just like boost the entire fleet. I was just,
yeah,
I miss those days.
That was horrible.
I know, but it was horrible for one side, but it was great for the other.
Yeah, like what I was saying was it's interesting how like on the kind of the Moonin side of that matchup, it's very much more like technique that kind of gets you through winning the fight, really. Like making sure that you kind of try very hard not to get bombed when you warp in. If you have time, controlling where you warp in, you know, like try and get behind a bubble or something so you can't get warped on. And then like broadcasting, like target broadcasting. It sounds like a really stupid thing, but when you're fighting Kikis, if you want to win the fight, they're going to either shoot your Logi or your Munins, right? Which are, probably going to die about the same rate, but they're worth like 3 times more than a Kiki. So if you want to win the fight, you need to kill Kikis 3 times as fast as they're killing your mainline DPS or your Logi ships, right? So actually getting good at broadcasting targets like really, really quick and making sure they're dying and you're still maintaining your like alpha thresholds, like that's a thing actually that I learned a lot about how to just get better at target broadcasting as an FC in general from fighting those fleets.
Do you usually split the roles? Like, we should do that more often. We used to do that all the time. We split the roles of like, someone's FCing, someone's anchoring, someone's calling targets, right? So
I think
the
that's
FC
definitely something
might just call the targets, but
yeah, it's something that definitely would be beneficial to do. But when you're kind of on the clock in those response fleet kind of thing, like it's very difficult to get all of the right people in the right time frame. Very often you're kind of doing everything. I can't even count the amount of times that like I've been the FC, the monitor, the bridge titan, the Cyno, the eyes, just because you're the first person there, right? Yeah. So it's much more often that we get like one guy who's the first guy on the scene to form a fleet, and then they kind of end up doing everything.
I think there's also an aspect too of like there's some people that just work better when they're just in control of everything and they're able to do everything themselves instead of having to there's the aspect of trusting the abilities of the person that you're putting in that position to be able to do it correctly. And then you have to be able to communicate them what your intent is with, clearly and quickly to be able to like maintain that. But if you're just the one that's calling targets and stuff, you don't have to think about all of that and you don't have to communicate and have like that extra step that allows for miscommunication or for something to go wrong. So if you're able to do it, then...
Exactly.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I mean, when you're kind of doing everything yourself, you know what you're doing, right? You don't have to like tell other people what to do half the time.
Right.
Yeah, you know that warpen is exactly at 70 where you want it. Mm-hmm. You've got those eyes on grid. It's not like 500 kikis. It's only 150, right? Something like this.
Yeah, I mean that's actually one of the things I was talking to someone else about very recently. I think like one of the things that is like an underrated skill in a lot of FCs is like understanding which fights to take and which ones not to take. Like there's a certain threshold where, sure, maybe you can like try and like do your best to like save the rock tackled, but you really just don't have enough. And like you don't have perhaps even, maybe you have enough, but they're the wrong things, and kind of being able to evaluate the fight before you take it is one of those things that's really going to kind of differentiate you from like winning or losing. And it's only learned through losing. That's
like totally an admirable skill too, because I think I'm pretty sure like I've talked to you about that before, Pando, too, just being able to like, because I've sometimes I'll like throw around wanting to get more into like trying to figure stuff out at that level so that I would start being able to like dip my toes into FCing instead of just like logi anchoring and stuff. But yeah, just being able to tell like in your head on the fly, like you just look at a fleet comp and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, we could take that, or no, we can't take that. It's something that's like,
what's funny? No, what's funny? I think like a lot of times I don't know if we can take it. Like I really don't. Like it is not trying to.
You know that you.
Yeah, I've got a chance. I know what I have to do to have a good shot. Yeah. And then on the fly, I decide, like, oh yeah, we can start like this and then see how it goes. That's what I usually do, and that's
when you throw it up to us and you're like, do you guys just want to go for it and say fuck it, or do you want to say no and go home?
I sometimes do that, yeah. Yeah. But yeah, like sometimes I'm winging it, and I simply don't know if I should take that fight. And a lot of times that's the dynamic about Kikis versus Munins too, right? That we talked about. I can look at the fleet comp all I want. On paper, I should lose the fight anyway against Munins, is my opinion at least, right? If the FC plays it well.
I think that's definitely a blueprint for just winning the fight every time as the response FC with Munins. I think the difficulty comes in like executing that plan properly every time.
Every time, quickly, right? So the big advantage is that the defenders are always under time pressure, right? They have to come and save it. And another big advantage is like simply we have a lot of experience fighting Munins. Everyone's flying Munins, and we fly Kikis all the time. we get underestimated, and we know how to catch mutants by now quite well. Like if they make a mistake, there's a fair chance we can capitalize on it, right? So if that FC, like you come in and you don't make a mistake, I have a hard time. I really have a hard time. But if someone comes in and makes a tiny mistake, that might just be enough for us to get a good start and then steamroll that whole thing, right?
Yeah, I like the side of the defending Noonans definitely like requires, like if you get like an inexperienced FC running that, it's gonna go real bad, like real easy. There's a lot of nasty little tricks you got to be careful of. Like, they're leaving, they're running. Oh, they're warping to their drifter hole. Oh, let's chase them. Oh, wait, there's 20 practices with smart bombs logged off on the hole.
Oh man, I could talk about that for hours too. I'm just gonna, like, since we haven't done a ghost bomb in ages, I can tell you what, we had a ghost bomb. So maybe I should explain what a ghost bomb is in the first place. It's like practices that are locked off, right? And we had them set up. Like, I mean, if you think about it, it's complicated to get them in place in the first place, because you have to have the right wormhole at that time. Then you have to take those practices, warp them to that wormhole, lock them off, to then later come with a fleet to bait hostiles into that exact spot. And it's more complex than it might look in a video or something, right? But what I wanted to say is, those practices, I wanted to catch an entire mutant fleet, right? That's what I was looking for. And so we set this up, and my plan was, okay, what time zone do I go to get the maximum amount of mutants from you guys? And I was actually aiming to catch Willy with it, because he gets the best numbers, and he always forms mutants, and he's very confident. And shortly before that, he caught me once because I fucked up, right? I fucked up when he caught a bunch of my kickies on the wormhole. So I was like, that dude, he is 100% following me. He's not going to think twice. He's going to bubble that wormhole for me and then warp into that bubble, and I can just like murder all these mutants. But I show up, no Willy forming. I show up again, no Willy forming, right? And it's like, what the fuck? And then finally, someone's forming, but it's not mutants. It's like, God damn it. And then I think the first time I lost patience. I was like, I had these guys locked off there forever. So we went for
Retributions, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was Retributions, actually, yeah. So there was a Retribution. I was like, guys, all right, log them in. Let's fuck those Retributions up. It's like, shit. And,
I remember being there for that, because it was like another FC running that fleet, and I was kind of, they were the first person there, and I kind of turned up afterwards, and I was sitting in comms. Like, I just remember sitting there the whole time, and I was like, why would you ping Retributions to fight Kikis? Like, just take Moonans. And then, like, 10 minutes later, I sort of turn around, I've gone to get a drink from the fridge or something, I come back, and it's just like, I put on my headset and heard like, oh no, it's the smart bombs. I'm sat there like, oh jeez.
No, the smart bombs.
I knew instantly what had happened. I was just like, that could happen to anyone. Like, I'm so glad that wasn't me.
Yeah, we did it. We did it later on against some legacy jackdaws, and then I tried, like, in between, I tried my fucking best to bait a mutant fleet, but I was aware, like, there's a fair chance they can tell what I'm trying to do here. But I was hoping.
Well, it's one of those.
It's another one of those like nasty little tricks, right? Which is very effective in the sense that it's a little bit like pipe bombing, right? In the sense that often failing it is just as effective as succeeding in it. In the sense that like the threat is always going to be there afterwards, even if you haven't set it up.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look at it like that. Like, Kikis are AB fit. It takes a long time for us to get from the warp in to the wormhole if we don't have a good angle to warp in from and all that stuff. And we're very we're a great target for someone to just warp in and just start blopping Kikis while we burn to the wormhole. So the second you pull that off once or twice, people are thinking twice about warping in then, right? Which is great.
There's just so much sketchy stuff that you can do on the drifter wormholes because of the like weird warping mechanics, right? And I know that certainly ever since you kind of like got that good smart bombing run on some of our retries, like.
Oh, did you look into it, how it works?
Well, I looked into it a little bit actually. I listened to one of your FC chats, I think, that was talking about it. It's kind of interesting how it's.
I gave it away once, I think, yeah.
But like definitely ever since I saw that, like every time you brought Kiki Fleet to SO after that, like you guys start warping off, and I'm like, nope, not today.
That's, you know, that's
Yeah, I remember there was one time, like after you'd pulled this a couple times, so everyone knew the trick, and you'd warp back and forth to and from the hole like a good 3 or 4 times, and we just weren't following.
Yeah, that was after the first time. So after the first time we caught the retributions, right? I was thinking, okay, maybe they think, okay, we're just set up for like small shit with this, right? Because you don't see mutant fleets getting smart bombed all day. Like, it rarely happens. So it was like, that maybe with mutants, they're still going to be confident enough to say like, oh, let's like warp. And then also the warp in mechanics on those wormholes, because they're special, I thought maybe they just, you know, fuck up. They warp at range or whatever. Or they throw a bubble at range and then expect to land on the bubble edge or something, right? So I kept going with it, thinking like, I've seen weirder things than, you know, something working on the 3rd try. So I gave it another shot. And I was like, these guys, they're not going to follow, is it? So
I promise you, if you try that enough times, it'll work eventually.
yeah,
like,
I mean,
you'll find like the right FC on a bad day, and they're just not really thinking it, and like it'll just happen, and like, you know, bam, minions be dead.
well, there is a way to still land at range on a wormhole, even if it's bubbled. I'm just saying. Right, those mechanics, they're weird enough the way you see it, but there's like ways around this too. So it's every time we do this bait thing, it's also a risk for us. I mean, the second time you guys had practices too. Remember?
Oh god, I remember that. Yeah. We didn't even know about that. That was just like some random like people from the Alliance just started warping over there.
I recognize one name, but I forgot who it was. But he tried to actually smart bomb praxis us while we tried to bait you guys into our smart bomb praxis. You know what the problem was, though? We didn't land on the same spot because of those warp in mechanics. We landed on the bubble edge. I mean, technically we didn't. Technically we landed just at 20, which just happens to be the bubble edge. And those praxises landed on 0. So they weren't in range, right? Because obviously, if we try to bait you guys into our praxises, we don't want to be on the same spot. We want to be out of smart bomb range, because we for sure gonna die, right? You guys might have a shot, actually, with mutants.
It's like that 4D chess, right?
Yeah. I kind of enjoy this kind of stuff, though. So I was like, oh shit, like this could have been it, right? If they, but he had no way of predicting where we would land, other than hoping we would land at 0, which is where most people would be landing, right? So
yeah, I mean,
like ever since perfect.
Ever since I saw all the crazy stuff you can do with drifted wormholes, like my entire approach to that is like, I don't know how well this works better than Pando knows it. Like I'm certain he knows stuff I don't, so I'm just not going near it.
Yeah, that's the best part about the, or like not the best part, but like that's why I'm not so mad that I never caught that mutant fleet I was looking for, because the passive effect of this is just so much so useful for us, right?
There's definitely been a few fleets that I've been on that they could have destroyed us if they chased us, but you could tell that they were just too afraid to chase us, so they didn't bother trying.
Yeah, sometimes they still chase us. Like the last fleet I did, where XIX came after us with their Hecates, and again, the warping mechanics, you have to understand them, right? So they got dragged on 0, which they didn't realize, and like I was ready for it. The second they entered warp, we just turned around, burned back to the warp in, and then they all landed there, and we just like killed them all in seconds. That was quite nice.
Oh shit! I think they're warping here. Like everybody get back on 0.
Yeah, there's definitely some drag mechanics in this game that are like real filthy, dirty little tricks. Like, we had that fight recently in Oh Shit where you guys had Ravens and we had like Tempest Fleet issues. And I warped to a ping on the grid, and I saw when I warped to a ping on the grid that you had the dicta bubble lined up to drag my fleet into the center of the Fortizar model. I saw that.
Yeah, that's one of those dirty tricks. Or like one of my favorite tricks is also the warp to 0 on the gate, even though it's bubbled.
Oh yeah, like the 400-kilometer drag thing. That's interesting because there's so many people who are so mad about that when they saw it. But
I love it.
At least a lot of people I talk to, but like it makes sense when you look at the bubble mechanics, and I'm actually kind of surprised that it's taken the game this long to realize that was a thing you could do.
Same. Like when I realized that, I was like, have people been doing this the entire time? I never noticed. But like I talked to a lot of people that have been around a lot, like very experienced guys, and they're all like, "What are you talking about? How does that work?" They didn't get it. You know, it was like, I'm onto something here, right? Nobody ever used it.
We had to make several diagrams to explain this to some of our experienced FCs on how this worked.
Like when you get it, like you understand it, and it seems very simple.
Super simple. It's super.
But at the same time, you look at it and you're like, no, it can't be like that.
Yeah, and so the guys on stream that are listening that don't know what we're talking about, it's like, I'm gonna explain it super quick and super simple. So a bubble drags 500 km. If a bubble is 501 km away, it's not gonna drag you, right? So from the spot where you warp to, so if you drop a bubble, let's say 495 behind the gate, or 400, something like that. All the bubbles in front of the gate, not the bubbles, sorry guys, no, I didn't do this in ages actually. So the bubble has to be like a couple km behind the gate, like 17 is usually what I go for, right? So if you would warp in, you would get dragged right into the middle of the gate, correct? So if you then warp to a spot that's 495 or something behind that bubble, there's no room there for any other bubble to intercept that warp, right? So even if there's a bubble in front of the gate, that bubble is going to be too far from the spot you warp to. So you warp to the 495 km spot behind the bubble, and you will always get dragged to the gate. There's no way to keep you from warping on zero then, which is like a really good tool for situations where you are trapped in a system. Like for example, the G Magic and TCAG situation. That's where we used it. We can
you guys
jump
know all about
over.
that G Magic gate, don't you?
Well, I wasn't a jump bridge fanatic. That was more of Shines than anyone else. Like he reffed that every day or like every second day. But yeah, whenever we jump in, it's very easy for you guys to throw bubbles on the gate and then camp it and then, get more and more numbers to make it bloody if we want to extract. So in that case, it's super easy for us to, warp on zero and then jump the gate. And on the other side, we could do the same to you guys. So you don't really want to follow. It's like, it was this weird dynamic. But
definitely like it's a real interesting like use of the game mechanics, and it's actually one of the things I kind of impressed by a lot with you, Panda. You're kind of always doing something new, pushing the kind of mechanics in a way that people haven't seen before a lot of times.
Thanks.
But that bubble shit, right? Like, I understand it's completely legal. I'm not gonna claim it's some kind of exploit or something, because it's not, right? That's just how the game works. But I really think that CCP needs to look at that, because like that fundamentally undermines how bubbles are supposed to work in the game.
So I actually did combo Rise right after and explain to him how it works, and also explain to him what I think would be an easy way to fix it. And I think an easy way to fix it is simply saying the drag range is a little bit like it has a little bit of a what do you call it, deviation. So you can never tell exactly how far it drags. You can tell it at least. Well, you can say at least it drags, let's say, 450, but it might also drag 470, right? So you can't really count on that exact sweet spot.
Sitting you at zero.
Yeah,
that certainly would fix that, but I just really don't like the idea that I don't understand like exactly what that mechanic is going to be.
Well, if you warp to
something. If you warp to something, and like if you're in a fleet fight and there's a block bubble like in front of the fleet, or sorry, behind the fleet, and you're like, well, I'm going to warp to them, and I don't know if I'm going to get pulled or not by that drag bubble behind them. Like that feels horrible to me.
Well,
you know what I mean?
So, well, the way I started it when I sent that to Rise was also like, if you think this is a big like thing and it needs fixing, which at the moment I don't think that needs fixing, right? It's like it might just come across a little dirty in that moment, but setting it up takes time, and not everyone is going to be ready for this on every gate. You need a dictator to bubble at the right spot and all that stuff, right? So it's not like you can't just click the button and you're gone, right? You still have to jump the
Yeah, I was
gate.
gonna say it's tedious to set up, and also in those particular conditions, like that was the regional gate. Like the reason we didn't really want to follow you to the other side is because there's a super fleet on the other side, and
Yeah.
I don't think that like it's necessarily something that you would really get a lot of usage out of, any other gate.
Exactly. You know what's also so I think the first 2 fleets or so where we did it, a PGL was FC, and he has that famous rage at like his dictators, right? Which I always find funny. Like, if we ever leave again with like less than 10 fucking dictators or whatever he said, right? And we took that gate, and I just kept saying, your dictator pilots suck or whatever, right? We just bailed out, acting like it was like the dictator's fault. And I bet the first time everyone thought like, they just initiated warp too early or whatever, right? But then also we talked about that when he was on, and he was like surprised that we even used it for like these small fleets. You could move super fleets through gates if you wanted to, right? But when it comes to like little tricks like that, a lot of times we had ideas to do like certain stuff, and then those ideas just like they're just on hold, right? And you never really get to do it, right? Like a good example is, for example, a chemos. We didn't like, I had chemos in Python or in EFT for like, I don't know, even know, like a year or like 2. I just didn't have the chance to use them before we first did it, right? And I felt like, I don't know, we could have used them earlier, and I just didn't want to wait like a year for that one moment to actually do it. And who knows, that moment might never come, right? So we just did it there.
That's one of the kind of problems with having those kind of like ace in the hole back pocket kind of info and strategies, though. And I know that like certainly like Progon and Villy got a couple of those that I've seen that are like haven't really been seen before, but it's like not always useful. And part of the problem with keeping those in your back pocket is that sometimes they eventually just don't work anymore. Like if you never use it before it gets patched out of the game, like you kind of miss a trick there, right?
Yeah, you know what's also a good example?
Or if you never use it, or if you don't use it before someone else uses it, right?
Exactly, that's what happened to me once. What's the call again? What did people call it when you bridge in bombers and you bomb without moving and the bombs just sit there?
Yeah, you can't do that anymore though, which kind of
I know, but what was it called again?
I can't remember, but I know what you mean.
People gave it some name, but literally, like a corpmate and I, like Emilia, like he hasn't been around in ages, but we were theory crafting that like ages ago, and we're like, oh shit, we can't do this because we used to
Billy
kill.
says it's doom bombing.
Doom bombing. Elo did it. Yeah. So we were talking about that for ages because we used to do that on gate jumps to kill dictators, right? So you jump a gate and you just spam your bomb launcher, and whenever you decloak, obviously the dictator is going to burn in to decloak you because you're a bomber. So he burns right into your bubble and then a bomb, and then he dies.
I saw like Predators, which is like the kind of Black Ops bomber sig for test. I saw Predators doing this exact same thing maybe like 4 years ago now, before we moved to the south and settled in Esoteria. That's how long it was. And they were doing this with like Rorqual and Excavator drones, I think, or it's kind of around that time, like 3 or 4 years ago. And what they would do is like set up a covert ops silo that was kind of like halfway between the Rorqual and the rocket was mining. And then as soon as you like bridge the bombers in, the Rorqual starts recalling its drones, and you just bomb all the drones.
Yeah, well, that's one way. And then, so part of the trick was also that the bombers wouldn't even lose their invuln timer, I believe, right? So the first wave, those bombers don't even take any damage, which is a little crazy.
I can't remember the exact mechanics, but I think we were doing like, they were like basically tanked against that damage type, right? It was like one damage type of bombs and you passive tank against it kind of thing.
Oh no, like yeah. So the guys that didn't bomb yet, they didn't have to tank, right? So the first wave is out, they have to tank.
Pretty much.
And then so it's like way more waves than you could technically tank with those bombers anyway. But yeah, I mean that's one of those things like we had ready for ages, and then someone did it, and Willy says Elo did it. Who knows for how long Elo had it in his back pocket thinking about it, right? Mm-hmm. So, and he waited for that one situation to finally do it, and then he pulled it off.
Like so the whole tracking POS thing is like another one which I think has started becoming more well known now. Like I've seen goons doing it now. Like the whole like domination large artillery POSes.
Yeah.
Like the POSes that can hit out to like 1,000 kilometers and volley cruisers. Like, come on.
It's dirty. But a lot of people are like, I mean, everyone who's not a fan of Citadels, they're always like, oh, POSes were so much better. Like, look at POSes again. There's some shit that's really broken with them.
Oh, man. I still maintain POSes were, like, way better than Citadels. I am a real big hater on Citadels.
Yeah, so, I mean, I kind of feel like every time I talk to any FC in any group, they're always, like, I think every FC I ever talk to agrees that Citadels, how they are not good, right? And I think the idea was a different one too when they first announced it, right? It was a way different picture that they painted, and everyone was like, "Oh fuck yeah, destructible stations and all that stuff." And it turns out to be completely different to what they sold us. But yeah,
I was saying this to someone, I can't remember who I was telling this to. Like my opinion is that there's like the two biggest things in the entire game that like just stifle fights from happening is the changes that were made to Cynojammers, like Tenebrek Cynojammers, and Citadels. They are the two biggest reasons that fights don't happen.
I think Citadels are then like the Cynojammers. Like you have to explain that to me. Like, what exactly? Right. What changes exactly do you mean? Where they started?
So I'm not going to claim to be an expert on this, right? I'm not an expert on this. I'm sure there's a lot of other people here who are going to be like, I disagree with this, who are probably a lot better FCs than me. But anyway, like the previous incarnation of Cynojammers, where you could only ever anchor one Cynojammer, per system, and it has to be anchored on a POS, and it had no damage cap. Like that was a thing that had counters. Like you could seed dreads in system before the jam went up. You could shoot it with 10 dreads, and it was relatively, surely going to die if there wasn't anti-cap stuff on grid. There was like counterplays to it. Cynojammers nowadays, they have a damage cap to start with, so if a big fight kicks off, you just cannot kill it quickly. There is no way to kill it quickly. The fact that you can anchor more than one of them in the system, and then when the first one is reinforced, you only have to wait 5 minutes for the second one to be turned online. And then you have to like take this other massive fight to like offline that Cynojammer. It almost previously on POSes, when the Cynojammers were on POSes and you could only have one, it was reasonable to assume or think or plan for to be able to like reinforce the jammer and get it down. Whereas nowadays, it's like incredibly difficult to reinforce jammers or to make sure that a system's not jammed.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think the POS Cynojammers were the more interesting mechanic.
I mean, the way they were previously on POSes, I wouldn't have been upset to see them be a bit stronger than that. But I think the current incarnation is just way too far.
Yeah,
and I know that might sound a bit like spinny because obviously like we're kind of on the attacking side on this war, but it's been a problem for a long time. I mean, we were fighting under jammers before we moved to Esoteria, back when we were living in Vale of the Silent, right? And they were strong back then, and they're even stronger now. And we had a lot of experience actually fighting into like a big wall of Cynojammers when we were in the war with Fraternity in Deterod. They actually did a very good job of putting up a big jammer wall in the front of their regions and making it very difficult for us to kind of break through iHubs and kind of knock those jammers out.
Yeah, you know what? Like the last time I remember fighting with the old jammers was against what's his name? Gigax Circle of Two. And I remember those soft fights for like certain IHOPs. They always started with that jammer, and it was quite an interesting dynamic. And I also would say the meta around the Sinojammer at the time, it wasn't even completely established yet, because the Sinojammers, that mechanic on its own was maybe in the game for a long time, but together with Soft, not a whole lot of people like had experience with that, to be honest, right? And I blame the soft mechanics for that, because like a lot of people were just not willing to put any energy into like soft fights. Like you didn't see anyone fighting really at that time, and that's why like nobody got to discover like how the jammer mechanics work back then. And then shortly after, people were like, actually that's how it works. They got changed actually, which looking back is quite a bit of a shame, to be honest.
I think the old mechanics were certainly more interesting, and the new mechanics certainly could benefit from some of that kind of ability to have play and counterplay against them, rather than being like this very, very kind of static strategy. I mean, I remember one of the first interactions I had with jammers with an FC was when we were fighting Fraternity in actually the first war that we had with Fraternity, I think, when they were kind of attacking Immensia, I think it was, and we had a fight over, I think it was a staging citadel they were anchoring in ieatpaperbag or something like this. And I remember being me, sitting in system with a probing Tengu for like hours and hours and hours before the fight was going on, just probing for towers going up. Because I'd seen on Dotland, like it hit strategic like Sov level 3 like the day before, and it was like suddenly able to be Sino-jammed. So I was sitting there waiting for a tower to go up, thinking like, surely they've seen this, right? They have to be putting a jammer up at some point. And after about 2 or 3 hours, like I saw on probes, like a tower going up, and I was like, oh, I know what this is. And it wasn't actually like Sov held by Fraternity, it was Sov held by Siege Green, and it was a Siege Green tower going up. And I don't know if Billy, you all remember this, but I messaged Billy like in the middle of the goddamn night with where he is. And I just said to him, like, look, this tower's going up, it's definitely going to be a jammer. And we managed to get some dreads in before the jam went up, because we had a Fortizaran system. So we managed to drop like 15 dreads, 20 dreads or something into the fort in system. And of course, they started anchoring bubbles all around the Sino-jammer. Like far enough away that you wouldn't be able to shoot it with dreads, kind of thing, right? So I spent about 2 hours setting up bookmarks between Celestials and stuff to just find like just the right angle to be able to warp in dreads from a bookmark in a safe spot.
Bubble trick, huh?
Well, yeah, exactly. But I spent ages setting this up, right? And I was like super pumped about it. I was like, right, I've just, after like an hour of like just bouncing between different safe spots, I've got just the right bookmark at just the right angle. And if we just like warp the dreads from the Forzar to the safe spot bookmark and then warp it back down to the tower, they'll land in gun range and they can reinforce the jammer. And we like, form up like this huge form up, like supers and everything. And Villy's like, okay, like if you've got the bookmark. I think it's actually Pro God was saying like, oh yeah, he's got the bookmarks. Villy's like, right, look, it's fine. Like Karmen's got it. And I get all of the dreads warped off from the Fortizar to the safe spot, and I get everyone aligned down to the tower, and I warp all the dreads to the fucking moon at 0 by accident.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was like half the dreads in the end. Like I know it was one of those, like when I clicked the button, I immediately knew what I'd done. I was just like, oh my god, cancel the warp.
I know that feels so good. Because like, especially like Willy is in chat too, right? That fleet I was talking about earlier, where he actually caught me on that wormhole, that's exactly the same thing that happened to me. I had a plan in my mind, everything is perfect, and I aligned to that wormhole, and instead of warping to a certain spot, my brain was, I'm aligned to the wormhole. So I right click to the wormhole and say warp, and I was like, fuck, I didn't want to do this, but I'm already in warp, right? It's exactly the same thing. I knew already, like, shit, I fucked up. And, it's so bad.
I think we, like, in that particular situation, I think because only half the dreads were aligned, only half of them got the warp. Of course, Billy's dread was one of the ones that got the warp. We managed to get the rest of them onto the jammer and like take the jammer down, but it's one of those moments where like no one had to say anything. I was just sat there like, I'm so disappointed in myself.
Yeah, it happens.
But yeah, I mean, it's interesting that there was that many, like there was things you could do with the previous jammers that were like, you could make a good play on a jammer and get the jammer down. And nowadays it's kind of like, there's just not really anything you can do apart from sit there and shoot it with half an hour's subcaps. There's just nothing else you can do. Maybe there is. Maybe there's someone who's a smarter person, better FC than me, who's going to find out a better way to do it. But I mean, that's one of the biggest issues I have with Citadels in general, is that they fundamentally just like reduce the amount of options you have to take fights.
Well, there's always a better way to do it, no matter what you do, right?
Yeah, pretty
like
much.
How many times, and Miranda can attest to that, how many times did we come back from a fleet and we killed a bunch of shit, and then I was like, fuck, but we could have done this and that, and we could have killed more here, and like this guy got away, and like for what, like I don't know, there's always something you can improve on anyway.
Yeah,
I think most FCs are like that, right? They always kind of replay like the previous engagements of the day and how they could have done it differently, got more kills.
That's how you get better, though. So
yeah, you know what's like? I know I have talked about that before too. People in fleet, they always think that's like a bad thing or so, or that I'm
you're too
like,
hard on yourself.
Yeah, that I'm mad. Like I'm kind of mad at myself, maybe, but in a weird way, I enjoy being mad at myself. Right? I enjoy the fact that I could have done even better, or like
you like trying to figure out how to do things better.
Yeah, I enjoy the process. So whenever
but you
I say
are also hard on yourself at the same time.
Yeah, but like the thing I'm trying to say is like I enjoy that part of like traveling home and then thinking about all that, like solving these problems, and then it might come across as if I'm like negative about it, or I'm like sad or whatever, like, but that's not what it is, right? It's like, and then people keep saying like, oh yeah, no, it's fine, like dude, it's okay. It's like,
don't worry, Pando. Stop crying, it's gonna be okay.
Yeah. I was like, oh.
I think that's just a really positive trait to have as a person, even apart from Eve, right? Like the ability to like self-reflect and be self-critical and kind of learn from your own mistakes without someone pointing them out to you. It's actually a thing a lot of people in the real world just don't have, right? It's certainly one of the things that's going to make you not just a better FC and Eve, right? But just any game that you play, if you're able to kind of look at what you've done before, see your own mistakes, and then learn from it. Like that's the only way that you can really get better. Either someone else tells you what you did wrong and you learn from it, or you look at it yourself and see what you did wrong and you learn from it. And I
talk about that a lot. Like, in the army we get evaluated every year and stuff, but like it's very clear from a leadership perspective that the people who succeed, like in my job, versus the people that don't, like the people who succeed are the ones that are able to self-reflect and realize what they need to improve on, because then they can improve. But the people, like blanket any type of person, the people who think that there's nothing that they can get better at are going to stay stagnant, and they're never going to get better because they think that they're already just as good as it's going to get.
And it is shocking as well. Maybe this is just me being really bad FC, right? But it is shocking if you watch yourself how many mistakes people make. Like, I'm sure even good FCs make a lot of mistakes a lot of the time, right? Like, I think maybe the start of the year, I started actually like taking video recordings of myself when I'm FCing, and then go and like watch the video afterwards and kind of review and be like, oh, you could have done this, you did that wrong, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, how much shit you miss, right? You're just looking at it and stuff.
There's so many times I've been like watching a video of me FCing, and I'm just sat there like, how are you this bad? Like, just seriously.
Yeah, I think I've never watched a video of myself FCing where I thought, like, fucking good job.
Great.
Like, that dude rocks, right? It's always like, oh my god, like, why this? Why that?
And he's still watching videos from like years ago too, and being like, God damn it, why didn't I just do that?
Yeah, well,
in our we have a small gang sig in tests, and we have our own SRP. And when those guys put in their SRP requests, what we ask them to put in there is just a simple statement about what they could have done differently in that engagement. just to like encourage the
interesting.
attitude of, because it's so easy for people to just, you know, blame this guy, blame the other side. You know, it wasn't my fault, but you know, just to force them to think that, you know, you're
I
still in
got
control of what
blocked.
you can do, and you could have,
Yeah.
you could have done something
Outlet.
different. You know,
It's
what
so
you could
easy.
have done differently.
Yeah, it's always so easy to find an excuse, right? Especially the like I got blocked excuse. Like, yeah, but that's what Eve is kind of about, right? To know when to be where and, you know, not get blocked, for example, right? That's a good skill to have. Like, I think especially small scale or solo wise, the real skill isn't even the skill fighting. The real skill is like finding the right fight, right?
Correct.
And a lot of
Knowing,
people are good at that, but a lot of people also suck at that, and they just wonder, I'm only getting blobbed. Like, yeah, that's where you have to improve, right?
Right.
And so, and about stuff that like, since we talked about like stuff that we kind of learned like leadership wise or whatever from Eve, and I think the number one thing, or like maybe one of the biggest things I learned, is actually not to get too invested in ideas, because like obviously I love like coming up with shit and all that stuff, and then sometimes ideas are just not that great, right? And it's fine. Like not every idea ever is going to be like that home run, right? And a lot of times, like years ago, like, it has been a while, I think, I come up with something and I would get too invested in it. You know what I mean? Like, I would have that dream scenario in my head. Maybe I bounce it off of someone. Maybe that someone has a good point why it doesn't work, but my brain doesn't want to hear it. Right? My ego is in the way. Like it used to be a thing.
Pride issue.
Yeah, it used to be a thing, and I think I got rid of that like a long time ago. At least to a degree. It probably still is there. A little bit, right? Don't make that face, Miranda. Come on, don't be like that.
There's definitely a danger, like when you become too attached to an idea and you really want to see it work. Even if it's a good idea and it can work, it's really easy to fall into the trap of like just trying to force it and try and make it work when it shouldn't, rather than kind of waiting for the right time.
Yeah, or like the worst that it can be. I don't think that ever happened to me, but I've seen it with other people. There's an idea and they kind of know it doesn't work, or it's wrong, right?
A half idea.
But they go down with it anyway. You know what I mean? They just fucking stick to it anyway. They get so invested, they're not willing to drop it, even though you can tell they know, or they have to know that it's like wrong or doesn't work.
But that's why it's a pride thing, because it's 100%. It's like that person's ability to admit that they could possibly be wrong about something.
Yeah.
That they're just not willing to like
Ego.
accept.
Ego, pride, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
right? It's like a wild mixture of things, I believe. Like, it's not only like one thing. There's like, it always depends also, like, who do you talk to, right? So, you know.
I have like the perfect anecdote about this, about just really trying to make something work and it just doesn't.
Do it.
And I'm not gonna say it because I don't want to be mean to anyone, but I'm sure that everyone in my corp knows exactly what I'm talking about.
You can't just wind it up like
exactly
that.
Like
it was a big brain pro god fleet comp idea, and it just kind of never worked. But like, I'm not gonna call it out directly.
It wasn't a terrible idea.
It wasn't a terrible idea. That's the worst part. It was a good idea. It just didn't work in practice.
It was a good idea. Oh, it saved me. Sorry, we're being super vague. That's
like, come on. PGL has been around the block. Like, he can say.
So, I mean, it's like his thing, so I don't want to talk about it too much. But like, ProGod was on a crusade for a little while about what's a decent idea, which is that, you know, the reason that hack fights, which is, you know, really the predominant meta in nullsec, the way they always kind of play out the same way is you get two hack fleets and they fucking shoot each other's logi because the logi doesn't have ADCs and they can't tank, right? So ProGod's idea was, well, what if we could find a logi that has an ADC? And it was the Iketursa, I think it was.
Right.
So it was like Iketursa logi with like an armor hack fleet. And like on paper, like it's like the concept is really smart. I think it's a really interesting idea, but like in practice, it just didn't work. Like really, it's one of those things that should
Swag
work on
surfers,
paper.
is that
but
what you
there's
called it?
That's what it was called. I'm not going to say that's what we called it.
That sounds like a
In
biggest
all-
name. Swag surfers.
In all fairness, I was one of those icky pilots, and I was primary 6 or 8 times, and the thing is still alive. So it definitely worked from that respect.
It sounds to me like it worked. I don't know why you're hating.
Well, I mean, the real problem with it is that armor hacks just generally aren't that great, and also
That is true. We
the
had to learn
rep
that
range. The rep range on the Ikitursa is really, really small. It's like 15 kilometers or something at most, I think. So it's one of those things where, like, if everyone does everything perfectly, it'll work, and then you take a fleet out and it doesn't work.
The thing is,
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think people would make the same claim on, for example, the last Gilas I like to fly. The thing is, I mean, there are fights where they shine, and there are fights where it doesn't work, right? For example, and I think the same would apply to swag surfers. If the fight gets too big, it doesn't work anymore, right? Because then the logis get alphaed and you can't rep against it, and then it's just expensive as fuck, right? The same goes for like the last Gilas. If the fight gets too big, the concept doesn't work. And then from the outside, because I whelped like one like big last Gila fleet once, from the outside it looks like, oh, what a dumb idea. Like, but they fucking do great if the fight is not completely like lopsided, right? So
yeah, I never really like knew about this like Lars Gila thing until I think I watched like an SC chat or something where you were talking about it, and I was like, that sounds kind of interesting. And I kind of went on Zico and like looked up the fits and looked at them on Python and stuff, and I was like, this is actually pretty good. Like this is a pretty cool little fleet comp. But I think that I totally agree with you. Like it should be obvious to anyone that looks at it that it's not going to work on a big fleet scale. But I think there's probably also like some fleet comps that it's just like naturally not good against. Like anything that's got like cheap alpha, so you don't have to, the reps don't matter. Like hurricanes, for example.
It's Gilas. At the end of the day, they're Gilas. Gilas aren't that hard to counter. It's like, let's be honest.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, yeah, it's certainly more interesting than some of the stuff I've seen, other places.
Yeah, I mean, so I think the biggest strength of those Gilas are when you catch people like a little bit off guard with them. You surprise them a bit. They can kill stuff really quick. And you know what? Also, like the big factor there is they're quite fun for people to fly because it's different. People enjoy flying different shit, right? And then it's a completely like everyone is a logi, everyone is a damage dealer, and it's just a little bit more challenging, right? Because it's something different, and it's a completely different approach to fleets in general. I mean, not completely different, right? I guess it's a mix of like remote rep doctrines have been around, but nowadays you don't see remote rep doctrines, right? So I would guess it's not the norm. So it challenges people a little bit more. And I really do believe people like to be challenged in the game, right?
Yeah, I think it's definitely
it's good.
It looks like a really fun fleet comp for sure. Like I kind of fleetingly for a few minutes like considered kind of trying to use that with like my co-op and stuff. And the conclusion I came to was that the big upside of that would be that like definitely everyone would get on a lot of kill mail, so it'd probably just be our own drones on our own ships. It's one of these.
The upside is that everyone gets on every kill mail.
Yeah, like I'm 100% sure that like in trying to rep our own ships, like people will be like putting their damage drones on like their mates and that kind of stuff. Just because my corp's a bit like that. But kind of apart from that, I think
assist the DSV assist the DPS.
Drones,
oh, trust me, they'd find a way. They would find a way. Trust me. But it's really interesting. Where it's an interesting like kind of like small to mid scale doctrine, right? Like it's one of the things I'm actually kind of interested in getting into a bit more. Like after the war's over, kind of doing that kind of small to mid scale stuff a bit more because it's not something I've done really enough of to be good at. I think it's actually something I'll learn a lot from. And I think that small scale stuff, like armor Ishtars, is something that's really underrated, perhaps, in that kind of scale. It's certainly something I've looked at a lot and thought, you know what, I'd love to run armor Ishtars.
Well, I tried those too. With like heavy E-War, and then I tried a new concept of how to spread the E-War.
And then you bring some like
I do
some
believe
like Armor Eagles, and the Armor Eagles do E-War as well, and they get the ADC. They're still really
Armor
tanky.
Eagles. Stop it, please. That's another Pickles idea, isn't it?
Yeah, that's one of it's a bit
But
of a
I like
but-
it. You know what I
mean,
did was actually
it's not
armor
crazy, right?
rattlesnakes. Right? We did armor rattlesnakes one time.
Oh, that's insane.
It is, but like if you look at the EHP and stuff, it works out. Like, yeah, you don't have the resist bonus, but your rep power is insane. It's remote rep rattlesnakes. And look at all those mid slots, dude. Right? So
Yeah, there's definitely been a couple of ideas like that I've kind of heard from ProGod and been like, what were you smoking when you came up with this? And then I go and look at it in Python and I'm like, okay, I can see that. I can see that.
And
I mean,
you know what?
that's one of the things I love about Eve, and I think that probably it's something that you like about Eve quite a lot as well. The game is so complex. There's kind of probably, as long as the game goes on, going to be some amount of like novel and interesting new ideas you can come up with.
Yep.
Like, there's no way to solve Eve because it's just, even on like a purely like on paper mathematical looking at fleet comps level, you cannot solve Eve. There is no degenerate strategy.
Yeah, you know what? I think a lot of people think, oh, it has been all figured out. But I think the warp trick that we talked about, or even Stukas, they highlight that stuff can be in the game for ages and not change at all and take ages for someone to figure it out. Because, like, for example, Stukas, they, like, nobody used them for, like, I don't even know. Like, I think Command Destroyers have been in the game for, like, 1.5 years, maybe 2 years even, before we even did Stukas, right? So, and then the warp trick, obviously, you could have done that, like, 10 years ago. Nobody did that.
There's an element of it as well, which is just kind of like the rock, paper, scissors kind of like way that metagames develop inside games too, right? I mean, if you spoke to someone a year ago and said, hey, do you understand how the hack meta works in nullsec? Probably most like FCs would be like, yes, I absolutely understand. Like, these things good, these things not good. That's just how it works, right? And then, 12 to 18 months ago, nobody was using nano hacks to counter eagles and moonins, right? And yet here we are today, and goons have been pretty effectively using nano Cerberuses for a while, right?
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
sorry, what?
No, that was pretty much it. It's interesting how like even things that people think are well thought out, like really there's still a lot of room for kind of evolution there, and kind of maybe not even evolution or even kind of innovation, but just like the rock paper scissors nature of the game means that you can do a lot of things with things that you already knew.
Yeah. All right. So on my list, I also had the M2 dash.
Okay, I need to take a bathroom break real quick before we talk about that. So back in like 2
we're
minutes.
already an hour and a half in, so that's usually where we cut it anyway. So maybe, I don't know. Should we talk about M2 dash?
I mean, why not?
Well, so like
but let him go pee first.
Yeah, but like I'm just gonna talk to you and like the rest, right? So one of the big questions I put on the list was like, why did it happen? I'm not sure if Karmen has actually a wireless headset and he's listening. I guess not. But I think that's like an interesting question because like it could have happened like ages ago, right? This war has been going on for ages. Why did it happen now, all of a sudden? And in M2 Dash of all places, I've never heard of that system name anyway. And I mean, tomorrow there's going to be probably a second battle. So we should
record.
maybe. I mean, it's a weekend. A lot of people are still on holidays.
Oh yeah.
So number wise has like real potential. So I'm curious what's gonna happen now. And then also another question I put on the list is like who won? Because like I mean, I was talking to Hai and some other people were talking on Discord yesterday, and Hai had a good point. Obviously, with like everyone kind of expected the blue donut Papi to dominate number wise, but they didn't, right? And then to come out of that fight even, I feel like it's more of a win for Imperium. But people could obviously point to me and say like I'm biased. So
Well,
according to Reddit, everybody won, right?
Yeah, I mean, so that's what I said at first. I mean, Karmen, that was you
question.
actually. One second, it was Karmen. Wasn't it you I was talking about about this?
I think a little bit, yeah.
So my point was, so who won? My point was, usually you would look at Titans and then Isquires, right? And it's so close that I would just say it's a draw, right? Like, what was it, 124, 130, 220, something like this?
I mean, it was relatively even. I think like some of the numbers I've seen from the Goon side is like 130 to 124 or something like that. Like they're a bit ahead, but you know, when it's like what 8% to 10% difference, like probably a little bit less than that. I mean, that's pretty even.
Yeah, so I would say like it's like nobody gets that win, right? But then you would look at what was the objective. I mean, not the objective necessarily. The Keepstar would get refed anyway, but what was the outcome at the end? Like, who has the better position at the end? And I believe that Imperium has the better position at the end because they're freely, like, they can log in and do whatever and, you know, tet up and all that stuff. Refuel, like get fresh fighters and all that stuff. So there's a certain advantage to that. So I would argue from that perspective that Imperium won that battle. But then you can see it from another perspective, which was actually, what was my argument there? I actually forgot what the point was.
I mean, obviously, I can't say this in an unbiased way, but you have to. I feel like it's unfair to not consider that we were fighting on a hostile citadel, a Keepstar of all things. Right?
Well,
and I can
historically,
I can say there were definitely a number of targets that we picked that lived because they were able to tether back up.
Yeah, which probably would not have lived otherwise. You know?
Yeah, I mean, like,
if you look at the historical fights, right? Like, as far as I can understand or see, in the history of people who've been attacking Keepstars with Titan fights, you know, generally the attacking side is worse off. And to go like effectively 50-50 on the attacking side, attacking a Keepstar, that feels like a win for me. You know, that's a good result. It's better than we expected. I mean, I'm certain that we were prepared to take a kind of worse outcome of that fight than what happened.
I'm trying to find, like, I wrote it down. I'm trying to find where I made that point about. It was on my Discord, wasn't it? I can't fucking find it.
Yeah,
I do remember talking to you about it in the chat.
Give me 1 sec. I'm gonna look it up.
I mean, I don't think that the position Pappy's in is as bad as some people perhaps would say.
Oh, so all right. Now I got it. So the point that you made, no, the point that Chosu made actually was legit, which was long term. It would be harder for goons to replace those Titans, which I agree with. Long term, right? Because like everyone's talking about those Titan caches and all that stuff. I don't think there's all that much of a difference going on right now. I believe that the goon approach is a little different in terms of every Titan that's lost, or like on average, goons have more secondary Titans, right? So they have a little bit more of a spread out kind of cache, if you want to see it like that, right? There's simply more people in goons or in Imperium that have a second Titan already ready to go that they can either use themselves because they lost the first one, or hand out to another like corp mate or so, and have their Titan cache like operate like that, which is, I believe, probably the easier way to handle things. And then on top of that, a few Titans. I know they have at least a good handful of Titans ready to hand out too, just from an alliance or like coalition, point of view.
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, Tess has been beating the drum about having a Titan cache to, do SRP reships for a while, and certainly that is a thing. Like, I've moved a good chunk of them myself in the past. Goons, like, my kind of very naive understanding of Goons is that they just have quite a different sort of culture to what a lot of the Pappy alliances have. Like, Goons are like very, very individually capitalist as a kind of group, is my understanding. Whereas, like, Test in particular is kind of a lot more like sort of socialist in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So the point that I was trying to make, or that Chosu made actually, was that long term, like let's say in a month or so, you guys would have a bigger or better chance of replacing those with like mining and all that stuff. Like you need the minerals, and then building new ones. While Imperium would struggle to do that right now, right?
Yeah,
nobody's really investing in like building Titans and Delve, really. So,
from what I remember, the point Choss was making was that if the scarcity changes had not happened, we certainly would be in a lot stronger position to be able to replace those Titans, right? With the kind of mineral and ore changes as they are, probably it's a bit more of an even playing field. Really, the thought process that I have though is that, yeah, sure. Like, no one's going to argue that both sides has holes on hand to hand out. The Titan losses from both sides will at least 2/3 of those be replaced and be back on the field tomorrow from both sides. Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as I know, every Titan that died from Tess has been given a new hull, like by now. So, I mean, I expect that most of theirs will be back on the field as well. But the question is, like, how. When the next fight happens and another like 250 Titans dead, at that point, how easy is it for people to replace Titans? And I think that the precarious position that Goons are in right now is, bearing in mind that they are quite like an individually capitalist kind of like social structure. How willing is someone going to be to put a Titan in build in their cities right now? Maybe some will, some won't, but like there's not quite so much confidence perhaps in doing that as there was before, right?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. So who won then? You know what I mean? So what do you think? I mean, that's like putting you on the spot. Like I can't ask like that because obviously you have to say you guys won. It's like,
mean, I think that we performed better in the fight, given that we were, attacking. I think Goons actually had more Titans than us in the fight. I think, going by what I remember seeing, but we traded 50-50 on an enemy cube star against them having more Titans than us. And we saw like a lot of Titans that we were, putting guns on and they were like tethering and stuff. So if that fight would have happened in open space, there certainly would have been a whole bunch more Goon Titans dead than the ones that did die. What the outcome of that would have been if the fight was in open space, speculation, no one really knows for sure. But like I think it comes down to the actual outcome of the result. I think it's pretty even, right? I think it's fairly even as it goes.
I don't think it's fair if your objective is a structure to take into account the fact that we fought on a structure. Like, I don't think that should really be a fair part of like, oh, we did really good because you guys also had the tether mechanics and stuff and you were fighting on the structure. But
okay, that's fair.
Like, you knew that like going into it. So I feel like that kind of nullifies that as
okay,
we did great considering you were fighting on a structure, but the point was you attacking that structure.
Okay, well, look at it this way. You had more Titans and tether that we didn't have, and you still went 50-50.
But I'm saying like the tethering mechanic shouldn't be an active point in deciding like
who won the fight
better.
Technically.
Yeah, because
I mean, who did better? Maybe.
The point is.
I mean, I'm not trying to say that was. I'm not. I don't think that's the point of like who won the fight, right? I think that bearing in mind the situation on the field, which was, from my recollection at least, that Goons had more Titans and tether, and we still went 50-50. Pappy tended to perform better in the fight, but who won the fight overall? Taking into account the kind of like outstanding situation and things like that.
Yeah,
maybe Goons have a slight advantage, but like I think it's more even than you think. Like there's a lot of spin about like the Pappy Titans being out of Doomsday fuel and all this stuff, right? I mean, my Titans logged off in M2, and I've got enough fuel to go until downtime the next fight, like easily.
I'm sure there's a couple Titans that are out of fuel. I mean, but I don't think that's like a big factor. But like whenever you talk about like who won the fight, you always have to like say, okay, by what metric, right? I mean, that's the tricky part. That's why I wrote it down.
Yeah.
Like, what metric do people actually like to go by? Like, is it only the Titans kills? which is like legit could like is one of the metrics I would go by for the war overall, right? To say like, okay, who killed the most Titans in this war? Then maybe that might be the winner, could be, right? Or the most keep stars or whatever. So, or you go like, who gained the most morale from that fight? You know, that's wars are won by or lost by morale. So you could also like look at it from that angle and say like, who did gain more morale from that? And I think the fact that Imperium was able to field this like an equal number of Titans or more at the beginning, like later on I think we had less, but that's already such a morale boost for like how this war went so far or was supposed to go, right? Like
yeah, well, I mean, I don't think I've spoken to anyone in test who's got a Titan logged off an M2 that feels like they're in a bad position. Everyone's fucking pumped, they're ready to go.
Can I want to like jump back in because now, people
Right.
are, commenting about my comment. My point is that like, if you're going into a fight and you're going to be attacking a structure, you can't then complain about structure mechanics.
We're not complaining.
Like
Oh no, sorry, that was a misunderstanding. Then I wasn't complaining about it. I was saying.
No, I know, but like there's like people in the chat and stuff that are like, if you're aware of a fact, it can't be taken into account. I'm not saying that you can't take it into account. I'm saying that like, if you go into a fight knowing that you're going to be fighting on a structure and they're able to tether, you can't like, it's not a fair argument to then be like, well, like considering that they were able to tether, we did great, because like that's a major aspect.
Right, that's totally wrong, right? Like if you have an army and someone else has got an army and their army's on a hill, and then you attack their army on a hill, you can't.
And then you're complaining about them being on a hill.
No. You can't then come afterwards and be like, "Oh God, you shouldn't be taking the hill into account at all because you knew they were on a hill." That doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
No one's complaining about tether, right? It's like everyone understands how tether works. It is a defensive advantage. Anyone who argues that tether is not a big defensive advantage is just either completely not talking about. They don't know what they're talking about when they're lying, right?
No. I'm not saying that nobody's saying that it's not an advantage, and nobody's like saying that it shouldn't be taken into account. I'm just saying like there are people that are like saying, well, it's, you guys had such an advantage by being able to tether. And I'm saying, yes, but you also took the fight there knowing that we would be able to tether. You know what I mean?
It's a strong advantage, but like honestly, from what I saw, like the amount of times that were saved from dying from tethering was probably like not that many.
Yeah, and that's just an example.
All right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean tethering. So what I meant by the comment was that the like fighting on a hostile structure, the structure itself is somewhat of a force multiplier, and tethering was just one of the examples of the reasons why that is. Because another example is not being able to effectively use your heavy fighter bombers onto targets that are sitting within the PDS of a hostile structure. It's
right.
to trade. I think to trade evenly while fighting over a hostile citadel is something to see as we did well in that respect.
Same goes for fighting under hostile jammer, though, right? That's a big advantage too. So I mean,
correct.
It is a tool. It can be a tool. Let's say it like that.
I don't totally agree with that. Based on the situation on the day, not based on the concept of jammers. The situation on the day was that Goons did have jammer control of the system effectively for a good portion of like several hours before the fight kicked off, and then also that they managed to get all of their or at least a very large amount of their supers and titans in before the jammer actually went up at the same time we got ours in, and then also every time we cycled they got their stuff in too. So it wasn't that one-sided under the jammer, I don't think. And then once it really kicked off, everyone cycled and got everything in.
But you could argue that the battle started before Goons had jammer control. So taking jammer control is already a hard thing, so you had that advantage going in. So, it's not as much of an advantage as having the keepster to tether and PDS and all that stuff, right? I'm very aware, but, it is what it is. I think that fight, surprisingly even. Right? I mean, who won? I don't even know. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
I would guess Imperium won more on a morale point of view though, which is important.
I think we'll find out tomorrow.
But
yeah,
actually,
I mean,
that's a good point. Actually,
I think the most interesting thing about this actually is, well, firstly, I don't think anyone really expected the fight to go like as even as it did. Probably most people expected one side to kind of win a bit more decisively than kind of did happen. But secondly, because of that situation, and like I think tomorrow's going to be huge. I think tomorrow's going to be a huge fight.
you don't think, or you think?
I do think it's going to be huge.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I think the reason it's going to be a huge fight is the reason it's always a huge fight is that both sides think they can win.
Yeah.
I think both sides are excited to fight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not because they think they could win, just because it's going to be an epic fight.
Right, but you know what I mean? Like, the FC in the hot seat is not going to press the button if they don't think they can win, right? Like, every big, like, really big fight that's ever happened in the game is, like, always come down to both sides think they can win. And I genuinely think that that's the case now. I think both sides think they can win.
Yeah.
Whether that is the case or not, I mean, it's hard to call. It's pretty even. I genuinely think it's pretty even.
Well, so I mean, that's the thing is, I think it wasn't all that surprising how many Titans Imperium fielded. I think, like for me at least, like we kind of knew our numbers a little bit going in. I think the surprising part was that the hostile Titans, like you guys, had a little bit less than we expected, and so I don't know if that had to do with the timing of the whole fight, right? Like what day it's on, and like between Christmas and New Year's and all that stuff. That might just play a role there. So maybe now on a Saturday, with a lot of people with holidays and stuff, maybe you guys are gonna have like way more numbers suddenly, right? So I don't know. So
we're just gonna have to wait and see, right? That's kind of what it's gonna come down to. Fights of this kind of scale, like no one ever really knows what's going to happen. I mean, I was pretty surprised actually by the numbers that Test put on field. We had like nearly 1,000 pilots. That was much better than I thought we were going to get. Well, maybe not much better, but it was definitely like reassuring to see that when the chips are really down, like everyone was there, everyone, at least from Test. That was real good to see. But yeah, how's it going to go tomorrow? Like, we'll see. I mean, I personally think it's going to be a really, really huge fight. Who's going to have the advantage? Obviously, some of the Pappy Titans and Supers and stuff are in a little bit kind of less advantageous position. I don't think anyone's going to argue that. But realistically, when we did have like slightly less Titans in the previous fight, and we were trading, on an enemy keep star where they had tether, we went roughly 50-50. So kind of if the same situation happens again, and obviously the keep star will die because you can't have the keep star not die in a fight of that scale. Like firstly, like are goons confident enough to take the fight when they know that they're, not going to have tether if the keepstar dies or when the keepstar dies? But secondly, like how differently is the trading going to go when tether disappears, right? That's going to be kind of the defining thing, I think. Other than the numbers, of course, right?
It's a scary thought to think about that fight kicking off.
I mean, it's
without the keepstar being there at all, because if you think about it from Imperium perspective. We could always dock up and, bail on an armor timer. But on a structure timer, there is a high potential of you just floating around in space. Mm-hmm. And that's basically it, right? And then, if you lose that fight, yes, you can't just not log in after downtime, which is like, probably what's going to happen. That one side is going to say, okay, we cut it right here after downtime.
Yeah. I think that's actually one of the most disappointing things about the setup for the fight tomorrow is that it is so close to downtime, really.
I don't know.
I mean, pretty much what the decision boils down to, really, I think, is that, Goons FC leadership are going to be sat there thinking, we are probably not going to get a better choice to finish off some of these super fleets. And, on Pappy's side of the fence, they're sat there thinking, if Goons go for this, when a keepstar dies, they are all in.
Yeah, because like even if you log, like let's say Imperium decides we don't log in after downtime, we're all trapped there, right? We're sitting there, pants off, and you guys are gonna have every advantage in the book. Finally being able to crack 1DQ maybe, right? So there is that potential for that. Another, like you say, it's going to be a huge fight tomorrow. I agree. It's most likely going to be a huge fight, but there's also always that possibility that, Imperium says, or like we say, like, I'm not involved in that decision. Simply, like, I'm not, too involved at this stuff at the moment. But Imperium says, like, no, we're just going to wait for the next armor timer. It's just a safer way to go. And then you guys have to consider, okay, like on the next Keepstar, which like M2 Dash, if you look at it, I don't even know why there is a Keepstar, because Goons had one spare, I guess. But it's not that important of a Keepstar, right? So, and then next Keepstar, we might just be able to be like, get another one of these fights and maybe do better, right? Maybe trade a bit better and make it nice and bloody again, and it has been a long fight.
The thing with that is that after all of the herfing that's been going on, like if Goons decide to not take the fight tomorrow, I genuinely think that'll be a pretty damaging blow to their morale as an alliance. Everyone's gonna look at it and think, oh, you had like half the Pappy Super and Titan fleet logged off in bubbles, low on fuel, low on fighters, 30 kilometers of a Keepstar, and you chose not to take the fight. Like, that's going to be real telling if that happens, right?
Yep, I agree.
From my own kind of personal standpoint, I think that's probably the right move on a strategic level, like a purely strategic level.
Not.
But morale side is also very, very important in wars like this, right? And also, not to like make like of it, genuinely, this is probably this is a very good chance for them to actually take that fight, right? But Villy's made a good point in the chat, actually, that really what it comes down to is, are Goons willing to do this now or in 1DQ? Because at some point they're going to have to.
Yeah.
And then maybe it's this Keepstar, maybe it's the next Keepstar, maybe it's in 10 Keepstars time, but eventually they are going to have to take this fight if they want to retain Delve.
Well, I mean, eventually you could turn that around and say, eventually you guys have to push into 1DQ, right? Which is obviously not easily done. So it's like kind of, I mean, for me it was surprising that this fight even kicked off to that degree, right? Like I had some dudes formed to do something there, but it was a different approach. It wasn't like, I wasn't expecting like a massive, like all-in kind of fights to kick off on that day. I actually locked that fleet off, saying, okay guys, like I don't think this is gonna happen. That was right after the first error booster. The dude that fail warped. I actually told the guys, like, hey, I don't think this is going to kick off all that badly. If it does, keep your eyes open. But we're not in ships that, are super effective. And I was tired as fuck. So I had to log off and get some sleep.
I think this fight was going to happen eventually, right? It just happened to be here. Yeah. I mean, when Goons did not contest the Null Keepstar at all, and just let it die completely without a fight, I can only imagine that must have been, wasn't it? Yeah, it was jammed. I can only imagine that was like quite a morale blow for them, right? But they didn't. I don't know. They didn't really contest the jammer either at that time, right? Let's remember that. Like we're saying the fight started earlier when they took jammer control. They didn't really contest the jammer for null. They didn't try to contest the jammer for null.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why that was. So I don't remember the whole null thing. I think we did some other stuff at the time. So there might be reasons why they didn't go for that, right?
Jammers aside, right? We have to get our Titans in somehow. They rested jammer control for a few hours and forced us to like put a new jammer up. And they then obviously when the jammer was up, signed their own stuff in. And they could have done that at any time for any of the jammers, right? And just so happened it wasn't null, it was the next one. But if it wasn't M2, it was going to be the next one, or the next one, or the next one. And eventually it was going to happen. It just so happened it was this one.
What Eve time is the M2 timer? It's at 0100 actually. I think 0110.
It's like 0110 or something, right? Yep. I mean, I fully expect the fight to start a long time before that. Already.
Yeah,
I mean, no. If it kicks off, it's gonna be like big tomorrow.
Could be war deciding. Could be.
Well, I think it probably will be. Yeah, I mean, it'll be bigger than the previous fight for sure, because everyone's had 2 days of like just rage pinging and huffing. Pretty much since the time I got up today till before the show, I've just been running move ups and moving like caps and supers and SRP titans and more titans, and we're moving our armor titan fleet, like just moving like just hundreds and hundreds of caps through low sec out down to Delve. If the fight kicks off tomorrow, like both sides are just all in for everything they've got, so it's gonna be fucking wild.
Yep. Let's see.
Karmen,
So
I've had 2 requests from the viewers for questions for Karmen.
all right.
I swear to God, if one of these is
That's-
related to pizza,
Then I would
Yeah,
say
the
let's.
first one is, do you like pizza?
yeah,
What
I
the
do
fuck?
like pizza.
What kind of question is that?
But it's a whole
It's
meme
a-
and test.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The second question, well, it's not a question, but I'm supposed to call you out for being the structure bash king.
I
So,
mean, so I looked at like the year in review thing in Eve, right? And
Mhm.
I'm only in the top 10% of structure kills in the game, so I think that's actually unwarranted to call me the structure bash king.
I don't
That's
know. We've been on a number of ops where there was like we had a completely different objective, and somehow we just find ourselves we're just bashing some random thing because
Structure
Karmen.
bash.
I would never
That's
do
kind
that.
of a
Fine.
theme with Pando too, actually.
Well, but I would say, to my defense, I have a really good track record of actually getting a fight out of those refs. Right?
Yeah.
I know when to ref a structure
jump
and
in.
where. Yeah, exactly. To actually squeeze out a fight out of it. Like I don't just ref a structure to ref a structure. I mean, sometimes I do, but yeah. But yeah, guys, if there's no other questions, I would say we
can
just
call
leave it. Yeah, we just leave
I
it
have,
at that.
I actually have one more thing. I don't know, you guys are all aware of Ithaca Hawk and the map that he
Oh
made,
yes,
which is like super dope.
yeah.
So he was doing a like a charity event raising money.
Yeah.
And they raised 75,000 ISK, which is like about 600
What?
US dollars. Yeah. And
600. Wait. So how much did they raise? Because you said
they
70
raised about $600
worth of ISK.
for the charity.
Because you said
Yeah,
75,000 ISK. It's like what?
Oh, sorry. No, way more than that. So yeah, so about $600 for the charity. And then Jan Kruger and Rex Judix matched the donations. So we just wanted to actual ISK. So we just wanted to give them a little shout out and a thank you and a heads up for Ithaca doing that awesome map and giving Pando his own island.
Yeah, I'm pretty proud of that one, not gonna lie. I think that map turned out like super awesome. Like especially with the color at the end. Like I already liked it a lot when it was just black and white. But then Rex Javix put like some color on it, and it looks really fucking nice now. Like looks really really good. And yeah,
Like
I'm pretty proud of my little island. Shout out to Ithaca. Oh, there he is.
Yeah.
And yeah, 75,000 real ISK. Okay, that makes more sense. I totally forgot that actually the Icelandic currency is actually ISK.
Oh yeah, Ithaca, if you have a link to your map that you drew, you can throw it in the chat too.
Yeah. I think everyone has seen it. Like,
I hope so.
yeah.
I remember us
I'd
like
be surprised
watching
if someone hasn't seen it.
Watching a stream of him drawing it. Way
Yep.
back when.
Yeah, I think I watched part of the stream when you were suggesting for him to add the drifter wormholes to around Fountain.
Yeah, I said like the drifter wormholes are missing, and then he added an island for me, which that's nice.
I have an island.
You
Yeah, I'm
remember,
not sure
like,
how many players actually got like their own little thing. It's only groups, I believe.
Do you remember that scene from The Matrix where like the intro is going in and like all the like numbers are scrolling and it's like you're inside the code and everything? Like that's how in my head I see Pando's like map of drifter wormholes.
Well, yeah, that's pretty accurate actually. Like the key guy running around That's what it feels like sometimes.
It's the meme of the lady thinking, and then all of like the mathematical diagrams are going on in the back.
And then you get to the end of it, and it's just Kiki's on the blackboard.
Well,
Yeah.
guys, I would say thanks a lot for showing up. I pretty much appreciate it, and I would say see you guys on the next one.
Yeah, well, thanks for inviting us, man. It's been a good chat. Like, it's been good. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks for the invite, Pando.
Alrighty, guys. Everyone on stream, thanks for the subs and bits and whatnot. Also, much appreciated. I'm gonna see if I can find someone to host, and I'm not sure if they're still legit, but maybe you get lucky, and at the end of the stream, there's gonna be a key for an Astero skin. Right? The Eve partner Astero skins. They're actually quite good looking. But it could be that it's a new month that they're not legit anymore. In that case, tough shit. So good luck everyone, and see you around.